This is He Who Moans, Doctor Who reviews. I only complain because I like Doctor Who, and I care. And I overanalyse too much because, whatever, it's just my opinion. It's Mark Gatiss time, everybody! Hooray! Which Mark Gatiss are we going to get this week? The actually entertaining one? The cool and interesting one? The sort of okay one? The jarring and awful one? Or the flat boring one? Well, let's spin the Mark Gatiss Wheel of Chance. Oh my god. I liked a Mark Gatiss episode. Wow, I never expected that. I mean, fuck. Am I wrong about everything and everyone? Maybe Ben Affleck will make a good Batman. Maybe Kevin Smith still has more to say as a filmmaker. Maybe the Paradigm Daleks weren't an awful idea. Maybe... No, I still thought it was boring. But still, Mark Gatiss did a decent job on an episode. Not amazing by any stretch, but I can say I enjoyed it. I guess I should talk about that then. Gonna have to crowbar some rants in there somewhere though. I mean, this video series is called He Who Moans after all, and Robot of Sherwood is far from perfect and not something I would call particularly great. Regardless of it being not too shabby, it still managed to raise a few interesting points about Gatiss' approach to writing Doctor Who, which do need discussing, as he is the big-name writer with the most attention at the moment, next to Moffat of course, when it comes to Doctor Who. And I'll probably end up spending a lot more time on that than the actual episode, since he's apparently almost certain to be our next showrunner for some reason that assumedly makes sense to Moffat and not to the rest of us. And even though Robot of Sherwood is fairly decent, it does further cement my arguments on Gatiss. But wow, it not being totally wretched was a shock. I must stress that I want to like Mark Gatiss, I really do. His comedy stuff is really good and I'm really a fan of it, but by this point I'd filed Mark Gatiss actually writing something I really like in Doctor Who, along with Jodorowsky's Dune and Half-Life 2 Episode 3 in stuff that I really want that is sadly just never going to get made. In fact, he's so inconsistent, depending on how his next episode comes out, I'm going to say about this episode, at least the stopped clock is right twice a day. Some people have loved Gatiss' recent work for their own reasons, but they've had a real Marmite effect on people, and I personally think that he should stick to comedy and stay there, which is where I really like him. And yet here we are, somehow I have a positive opinion of a Gatiss episode. How'd that happen? So, Mark Gatiss' basic approach to Doctor Who is an admirable one, and you could basically do it forever. Grab either a famous historical figure, thing from broadcasting history, or a piece of folklore, and start jerking it off. Charles Dickens, the coronation, Winston Churchill, which, you know, time traveller, at least Gatiss actually appreciates the idea. Problem I've had with him more than anything, aside from the insanely bad pacing issues, corny and awful jokes, and ideas that I'm just not really a fan of for my own reasons are 1. He's a caricaturist rather than a writer of actual characters, and 2. Thinking outside the box really doesn't seem to be his thing. He's a good writer and a good one to keep around because how much fun he finds it is infectious regardless of his very high miss rate, and it's probably why most cynics like myself are charitable towards him despite not really liking his work. But Robot of Sherwood is the optimum level of responsibility he should have, a silly one early in the series. He does have the sense of fun that Doctor Who needs, he's just really not that good at articulating it, and he heavily needs a steady hand to guide him and collaborate with him, or he'll end up pissing everywhere. And sometimes if you don't give him enough feedback, he'll end up pissing all over your pretty new marketing strategies. And it's clear on this one that he has had at least some creative direction. Just showrunner? No, he does not need more responsibility than this. But on caricatures, Winston Churchill, basically a box on legs that you press a button and it starts spouting World War II quotes. And from the start of Robot of Sherwood, I expected something very similar, and you can't blame me really. Tom Riley's Robin Hood is a medieval English quip-spouting toff, and his band of merry men a similar deal. But in the end, pulling back the veil of the rather rubbish first half, which was full of unfunny jokes, and a metaphorical knob-measuring competition between the Doctor and Robin, we reveal that this is all fake and being controlled by a crashed spaceship, and then it all suddenly makes perfect sense, and was actually a lot more effective when I stopped to think about it. It's nothing original, it's a formula that Big Finish have been working on for years now, sci-fiing up either a bit of folklore or famous historical figure for comedic effect. I have absolutely no problem with this idea. It's completely fine for an episode. Gatiss' execution of this formula here is far from perfect though. It's not funny at all, like was clearly the intention. Fun, but not funny. I think Mark Gatiss can be really funny, but when he has to filter himself for Doctor Who's all-ages demographic, he falls flat a lot more often than he succeeds. Though he does write Peter Capaldi's Doctor as an irritable bastard really well, and I really enjoyed that here, and Capaldi is really flourishing this series in spite of the rather standard average material that he's being given, and he's always at least fun to watch. But it's just not funny. It doesn't harm it, just Gatiss is really rusty on gags. The banter between Robin, the Doctor and Clara was fine at times, jarring and awful at others. Dialogue really isn't Gatiss' strong suit. Ben Miller has a standout guest role as the Sheriff of Nottingham, power mad with his robot army and... yeah, fucking stupid idea, right? But it's at least distracting and brainless enough to keep you entertained. To be honest, I would have preferred that we cut down lots of the first half to spend more time on the robot angle. Like with Deep Breath, it feels less concerned with its plot as much as it does with farting around and putting off having actual stuff happening. Most other writers would probably be a lot more excited by the robot bit of the plot, and the whole Robin as a robot bit, that just sort of got waved away after a couple of minutes when I felt there was something much deeper that could have been done there. And there are quite a few missed opportunities all over the place. Clearly missed due to timing constraints and focusing more on the episode's other aspects and going, look, it's sort of like a thing that you have nostalgia for. They have expended quite a lot of time and effort into making something that feels like it was made in the 70s. This one actually reminded me of Time Warrior quite a bit in parts too, but not enough to call any of it a rip-off. You may have noticed a rather large amount of homaging Classic Who that's been going on in Series 8. Each episode so far has contained vague remnants of an idea from Classic Who or a new series episode that we all liked, e.g. last one was basically Invisible Enemy crossed with Dalek. That's a thing that we've been complaining about a lot of late, which is very pertinent to this episode specifically, lack of originality. And while some have rebutted it with, you're just never fucking happy with anything, you were complaining about lack of connection with the classic show before. But I disagree with this assertion. I'm happy enough with it. All 3 of my Season 8 reviews have been kind of positive. All I've been doing is just quick to pop that hype balloon that people keep waving about everywhere that thinks just visually referencing the classic show and patching together certain elements and tropes makes it in any way like the classic show when it's kind of missing one key element. The classic show's gone and I've accepted that, and New Who does its little nods fine, and I'm appreciating Robot of Sherwood for what it is rather than what it could be, but I'm just reminding people that we shouldn't pretend this isn't something no one's ever seen before, and regardless of it being alright, it hasn't exactly been the one to activate the nerd excitement centre of my brain. I'm probably just talking more charitably because my expectations got so low after Time of the Doctor that I'd take anything by this point, to be honest. Daleks killing a bunch of people I'll take because it's distractingly brainless and it's at least entertaining, but I do recognise it's not exactly an earth-shatteringly new thing. It's just something to fill the time slot with, something I like to watch, but overall just something to do really. And same here, we've basically got a Pirates of the Caribbean flavoured Doctor Who episode. Pacification of the nerdy man-children for the time being, but not something as ground-shaking as, say, Genesis of the Daleks was at the time. And is that unfair? As much as I'm sure someone's going to say it is, I don't think so. There is no reason that the show should think that being provocative and challenging is too heavy an ask by this point. People tuned into the Dalek Master Plan for 12 weeks because it was so mental that you had no idea what it was going to do next. New Who, on the other hand, is hampered by the routine of predictability and willing to scrape by on the same old stuff, which unfortunately, there is no excuse for it. In the face of critics like myself banging on the unoriginality drum, we've had loads of excuses fired at us, primarily, it's 50 years old, what did you expect? When, guys, magic blue box that can go anywhere, anywhen. Not expecting something creative and different after 50 years is like saying that imagination becomes impossible as more time elapses, when people still make daring and challenging stuff all the time, even now. What makes Doctor Who exempt? A show can't last just by patching together traditionalist elements, coasting off that and calling it a victory. These 3 episodes have been fun, yes, but if you've seen enough Doctor Who, I can't imagine they'd end up in your favourite 120, possibly more episodes. I've seen all the TV episodes, so maybe I'm just harder to excite, really. I didn't expect something mind-shaking as, yes, alright, by 50 years, it does require some extreme thinking outside the box by this point, which it should be doing, and maybe the reason this is the best episode of Season 8 so far, according to me, is probably that I didn't expect whatsoever for the guy to do that to be Mark Gatiss. I went in knowing it would be cheesy, hokey and a bit rubbish. Nothing new and just something to fill the time slot with. And Mark Gatiss hit that particularly low standard of brainless and distracting perfectly. And yeah, is it really anything more than sci-fi adventure eye candy is a straw man argument, but the point I'm highlighting is this is why the magic of the classic show is utterly gone and we're complaining so much. Because it's not being daring enough, and it's not trying to push the buttons of society. And if we continue along the throwback route that Mark Gatiss' way of thinking champions, the show will run out of steam eventually. The classic show's 26-year-long stint was based on thinking outside the box, and stuff like Robot of Sherwood just doesn't think outside the box. It stays firmly inside its box playing with its action figures, which is fine, and it's actually enjoyable, for the time being, but its lack of originality just piles onto the arguments for why Gatiss is really not suited to the showrunner question, because endless throwbacks of varying quality are what he does best, and Doctor Who prided itself on being progressive and forward-thinking, and anything based entirely on throwbacks cannot last. By season 8, surely we should be thinking about the show's future and whether it's going to have a lasting impact, and I will admit I'm wrong if this is preemptive of me to discuss it now if the rest of season 8 nullifies this argument, but the only reason that I'm making it now is purely because of the Mark Gatiss showrunner question that's been looming over us recently. Am I being unfair? It feels like I am. And I will admit that if it turns out that I am talking out of my arse, which anyone who's watched enough of my videos knows that I do quite a lot, we're none of us perfect after all I'm saying is I personally think that even though I like a lot of Gatiss' work, that I just don't think he's an appropriate candidate for the showrunner position, and this one, while it's good, further proves why. It works, and it works well, but it's not something I'm going to remember in years to come. Except for the half a second this was on screen. Right, Patrick Troughton is an actor in the Doctor Who universe. Gee, thanks for reducing us all to gibbering wrecks trying to rewrite our continuities round that mark, you dick. So basically, the Doctor signed the rights to make a TV series based on his life to the BBC, which all of his assistants, just by random chance, have never heard of. No, wait, hang on. So the BBC will have more companions they can base on real people the Doctor travels with. The Doctor invented this brainwave that the TARDIS emanates that makes the companions forget the TV series when they see the TARDIS. No, wait, that's bollocks, isn't it? The second Doctor is Patrick Troughton, who agrees to play the Doctor in the television series. Wait, maybe the TV series that we're watching now is actually a fly-on-the-wall documentary series about the day-to-day life of a time traveller going through time and space saving people. Like, that'd explain the fourth wall moment in Dalek Master Plan. Yeah, that actually makes sense, doesn't it? And no, it doesn't make sense, and I'm talking bollocks, and my brain's hurting. I need to lie down. Alright, I'll do the conclusion. So yeah, while the years spent away from comedy really show, Gatiss has done a solid job. Whether this is the stop clock being right twice a day for him, this episode was do or die time for Gatiss, and surprisingly, he did. Just didn't do something for the history books. But I didn't expect him to, and it'll do for now at least.